It was a warm summer evening, and the grand hall was glowing with golden lights. People in fancy clothes filled the room. Laughing and chatting with drinks in their hands, the smell of fresh flowers mixed with perfume and expensive cologne floated. Through the air, soft music played in the background while servers in black uniforms moved carefully through the crowd. Among them was a young woman named Emma. She wore the same uniform as the others, her hair tied back, her eyes quietly watching everything around her. Emma was just a server to most people in that room. She was invisible. She moved from table to table with a tray in her hands, serving wine and small dishes. But while the rich people laughed and showed off, Emma's eyes kept glancing toward the black grand piano sitting at the center of the stage. It stood silently, untouched, waiting for someone to bring it to life. The event was hosted by a famous businessman who loved showing off his money and connections. He had invited important people from the city: politicians, artists, celebrities, and wealthy investors. Everyone was excited to see what surprise he had planned. There were whispers that a famous pianist might perform, but so far, no one had touched the piano. Emma moved carefully through the crowd, trying not to draw attention, but fate had other plans. While passing by a group of guests near the piano, she accidentally spilled a few drops of wine on the edge of the table. It was a tiny mistake, but enough to make one man turn and look at her with annoyance. He was dressed in a silver suit, with slick hair and a cruel smile. His name was Jared, known not only for his wealth, but for his arrogance. "Watch it," Jared snapped, loud enough for others to hear. "Do you even know what you're doing? Or are you just pretending to be helpful?" Emma apologized quietly, trying to move away, but Jared wasn't finished. He noticed the way her eyes had been drawn to the piano earlier, and a wicked idea formed in his mind. "You keep looking at the piano," he said, raising his voice a little more. "What's the matter? You want to play for us?" Some nearby guests turned to look curious. A few laughed. Thinking it was a joke, Emma froze in place, her face turning red. She didn't say anything, but Jared was already grinning. "Oh, come on," he continued. "Let's give her a moment." In the spotlight, she clearly thinks she's a hidden talent. Emma shook her head quickly. "No, sir," she said softly. "I wasn't." He cut her off, scared. "That's fine. It takes real skill to touch that piano. Not everyone's born for it." More guests were watching now. Some whispered, some chuckled. A few looked uncomfortable, but no one said anything. Emma stood still, feeling small under their gaze. Her heart pounded in her chest. An older woman nearby said gently, "Leave the girl alone." But Jared ignored her. He was enjoying the attention. He stepped aside and gestured to the piano. "If you're brave enough, go on, show us what you've got," he said, daring her. Emma didn't move. Her feet felt like they were stuck to the floor. She hadn't played in years, not since her mother passed away. The piano was once her escape, her passion, but life had pushed her away from it. Now she worked long shifts to pay bills. Her hands used more for cleaning glasses than pressing keys. But as she looked at the grand piano, memories came rushing back. Her mother's soft voice encouraging her, the feeling of the smooth keys under her fingers, the way music made her feel alive. Someone in the crowd said, "Come on, just one note." The challenge was growing, and the pressure was rising. Emma swallowed hard. She could feel the silence closing in on her like a thick blanket. Jared was still smiling, clearly expecting her to walk away in shame. She took a deep breath, slowly walked to the piano, and stood beside it. The polished surface reflected her nervous face. Her hands were shaking, and her knees felt weak. Nobody was laughing now. They were waiting, curious to see if the joke would continue, or if something unexpected was about to happen. Emma looked around the room one last time. She saw eyes watching her like hawks. Some looked amused, some looked doubtful, and a few seemed to hope she would surprise them. She sat down on the bench. Slowly, carefully, her fingers hovered over the keys. But she didn't press anything yet. The silence in the hall was now deeper than ever. Emma closed her eyes and whispered something to herself, a message only she could hear. Then she opened her eyes and gently pressed a single key. The sound rang out, soft but strong, clear but emotional. It was just one note. But it was enough to make people blink in surprise. No one expected that, and in that one moment, everything began to change. That first note was not the end of the joke yet, was the beginning of something much greater. Jared stood near the piano, still smiling, but now his smile looked a little nervous. He had started this to make fun of Emma, but the sound of that one note changed something in the room. It was soft, but strong and full of feeling. It wasn't just a random sound. It felt like it had meaning. People stopped talking. Glasses stopped clinking, and even the background music from the speakers went quiet. Emma sat still at the piano, her hands shaking just a little. She looked down at the keys, not at the people. The first note had come from her heart. And even she was surprised how it echoed in the big hall. She had only pressed one key, but it was enough to make everyone notice her. Jared laughed quickly, trying to bring the attention back to himself. "All right, not bad for a waitress," he said. "But that was just one note. Surely you've got more than that." The crowd chuckled a little, some nervously, others with curiosity. A few guests started whispering to each other. Some said things like, "Maybe she knows how to play," and "Was that a lucky guess?" Emma didn't answer Jared. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes stayed on the piano. Her fingers hovered above the keys, but she didn't move. Inside her heart, old memories started coming back. She remembered being a little girl, sitting on a stool beside her mother. Her mother was gentle and kind, a key, and always smiled when Emma played. She would say, "Let the music talk for you." Emma had played for hours every day back then. She was even offered a scholarship once. But after her mother died and her family struggled, she had to quit everything. Her hands now served food instead of touching piano keys. "Come on, let's hear something real," Jared said. Louder this time, his voice sounded more forced. Now, more unsure. He wasn't smiling as wide as before. Emma took a deep breath and slowly placed both her hands on the keys. She still didn't say anything, but this time, she didn't just press one key. She began to play. At first, the notes were slow, soft, and unsure, but after a few seconds, they became smoother. Clearer, the sound filled the room, and people stopped what they were doing. Even the ones who were not paying attention before turned to look. She wasn't just playing random notes. It was a melody, full of emotion, the kind of tune that makes you feel something deep inside, happy and sad. At the same time, like the story of a broken heart that still remembers love. Jared tried to speak again, but the words caught in his throat. He looked around and saw that no one was looking at him anymore. Everyone's eyes were on Emma. Even the businessman who owned the event was now watching her with interest. The music became stronger. Her hands moved faster, but with grace. The keys were no longer heavy or strange to her fingers. It felt natural, like her hands remembered every note, every pause, every breath of the music. Some guests slowly walked closer to the piano. Drawn by the sound, an elderly man whispered to his wife, "She's not just playing, she's feeling every note." Another woman had her hand over her chest, eyes wide. A few people had their phones out now, not to film her out of mockery, but to capture the moment. Something special was happening. Emma didn't look up. She didn't care who was watching. Her heart was speaking, and the piano was the voice. Every key she touched told a story, and every sound made the room feel more alive. Suddenly, someone in the back of the room clapped once. The sound echoed, and then others joined. But Emma kept playing. she hadn't finished yet. Her music had something to say, and she would not stop until it was done. Jared slowly backed away from the piano. His face was red now, and he no longer smiled. The joke had turned around, and now he looked like the fool. People weren't laughing anymore, they were admiring. One of the guests leaned over and whispered to another, "Who is she?" "She's amazing," the other replied. "She's just a waitress, right?" And the first said, "Not tonight." Emma finally finished her song, ending it with a long, soft note that faded into silence. The room was completely still for a few seconds, then a wave of applause exploded. People stood up and clapped. Some even cheered. Emma finally looked up, her face calm but her eyes shining with emotion. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel small. She didn't need anyone's permission to shine. Not Jared's, not the rich people around her. The music had spoken for her louder than words ever could. And the one who tried to humiliate her now stood silent, forgotten in the back of the crowd, his smirk gone, his power vanished. Emma stood slowly, gave a small nod, and quietly walked back toward the kitchen. But in the minds of everyone in that room, her song would never be forgotten. The night had started as a joke, but now it was something else, something real, something powerful, and it had all begun with one note. Emma stepped back into the kitchen quietly, her heart still beating fast. The clapping from the hall still echoed in her ears, but she tried to stay calm. Her fingers still felt the keys. Like they were made to play that piano she had not planned to do any of this. She just wanted to finish her shift, get her money, and go home like always. But everything had changed in just a few minutes. She stood near the sink, took a deep breath, and tried to focus on her work again. The other staff members stared at her, some shocked, some impressed. One of the older cooks smiled and said, "Didn't know we had a superstar here." Emma smiled shyly and looked down. She didn't want attention. She didn't like the spotlight. In her mind, she was still that girl who had to leave her dreams behind. Life had been hard after her mother died. Her father lost his job, bills piled up, and piano lessons became impossible. Emma had started working early, just to help the family survive. The piano had always been her secret world, her safe place. But she had buried that part of her life for years. Now, suddenly, it was back. And people were looking at her like she was someone important. Minutes later, one of the event organizers entered the kitchen, a woman in a red dress and headset. She looked around and asked, "Where's the girl who just played the piano?" Emma hesitated but raised her hand slowly. The woman walked up to her with a smile. "You were amazing," she said. "People are asking who you are. Do you have any idea how special that moment was?" Emma shook her head. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she whispered. "It just happened." The woman laughed kindly. "Not trouble at all. Sweetie, you saved the night. Honestly. They'll remember your song more than anything else." That happens here. Emma didn't know how to respond. She just nodded politely, hoping it would all fade away soon. But it didn't. Soon after, another woman came in, this time with a phone in her hand. She showed Emma a video someone had recorded her performance and already posted it online. It was spreading fast, getting views, likes, and comments. People were calling her the mystery girl, and some were even calling her a genius. Emma stared at the video in shock. She had always played for herself. Not for fame, not for a crowd, but now the whole internet was watching, and she didn't know what to feel. At the same time, in the main hall, Jared was pacing near the corner of the room, still angry and embarrassed. He kept replaying everything in his head, his loud challenge, the laughter, the silence, and then the applause that wasn't for him. He had tried to shame a waitress, and now she was the star of the evening. Some guests looked at him with smirks, others avoided his eyes. His face was red. and his ego had taken a hard hit. But not everyone was laughing at Jared. Some people started talking about Emma's story. They asked questions like, why is someone with talent like that working here? Or does she have an agent? One older man who owned a music academy stood up and said, I'd like to meet her. That kind of gift shouldn't go unnoticed. Back in the kitchen, Emma tried to return to her shift. She picked up a tray and started walking again, but something had changed. As she stepped back into the hall, people started clapping again. Just for her, some smiled at her kindly, some gave her nods of respect. A woman reached out and gently touched her hand. Thank you, she said. Your music reminded me of something I had forgotten. How it feels to feel. Emma was touched, but also overwhelmed. She wasn't used to attention. Not praise, not kindness from strangers. Suddenly, Jared appeared in front of her, blocking her path. His smile was fake, and his voice forced. Hey. He said, not bad out there. You surprised us all. Emma looked at him calmly. I wasn't trying to surprise anyone, she said. You dared me to play, and I did. Jared's face twitched. Yeah, well, maybe next time, try not to steal. The whole show, he muttered, trying to sound playful, but clearly bitter. Emma didn't reply. She simply stepped around him and kept walking. Her heart wasn't angry, just clear. She knew who she was, and she didn't need his words to define her. That night, as the event continued, Emma went back to her duties, but everything was different now. People saw her differently. They didn't see just a girl carrying drinks, they saw the girl who made them feel something real. And deep inside, Emma felt something too. Something she thought she had lost. She felt a spark, a small voice saying, maybe it's not too late. Not too late to dream again. Not too late to play again. Not too late to be more than what life had forced her to become. That night, in a hall full of strangers, one song had opened a door, and Emma had quietly stepped through it, even if she didn't realize it yet. The night grew quieter as the event moved into its final hour. But the feeling in the air was not the same as before. Something had shifted. The guests who once talked loudly and laughed at silly jokes now spoke in soft voices. Many of them still had the sound of Emma's music in their minds. It was like her song had touched something deep inside them. Something they had forgotten about in their busy lives. Emma was still moving through the crowd, tray in hand, but her steps were slower now. Not because she was tired, but because people kept stopping her. A woman with gray hair gently touched her arm and said, that was the most beautiful thing I've heard in years. A young man in a business suit added, you should be on a stage, not serving drinks. Another person asked, do you have an album? Where can we hear more of your music? Emma didn't know how to answer these questions. She had no album, no stage, and no plan. She only played because something inside her had woken up again at one table. A little girl tugged her father's coat and pointed at Emma. Daddy, I want to play like her, she whispered. The father smiled and said, then we'll sign you up for lessons tomorrow. Emma saw this from the corner of her eye, and her heart felt warm for the first time in years. She had inspired someone, but not everyone was happy. Jared sat at a far table, holding a drink he barely touched. His face was tight with anger and embarrassment. He kept watching Emma, his jaw clenched every time someone praised her. It felt like a punch to his pride. He had started the joke. And now she had become the star. No one was laughing at her. They were laughing at him behind his back. And he could feel it. A friend leaned in and whispered, you should have left her alone, man. Jared didn't reply. He just stared at Emma with a look that was no longer amused. Meanwhile, Emma kept working, but her heart was full of emotions she couldn't explain. She felt proud, scared, and confused all at once. Why were these strangers treating her like she was famous? She hadn't practiced in years. She hadn't touched a piano in a long time, except for today, and yet somehow it had all come back. She couldn't explain how or why it just happened. One of the guests, an older man with silver hair and a kind smile, stood up and approached her. He introduced himself as Mr. Linton, a retired concert pianist and current owner of a small music school in the city. "I'd like to offer you a place in our evening classes," he said. "No fees, no conditions, just come and play." Emma was shocked. She didn't know what to say. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Mr. Linton smiled gently. "You don't have to say yes now. Just think about it." He gave her a card and walked away. Emma looked at the card like it was made of gold. It wasn't about the name or the offer, it was what it meant. Someone believed in her, not because of her past, but because of what they saw now. Later, while Emma stood near the back wall, trying to breathe and think, the event's host stepped onto the stage and tapped the microphone. "Before we close, tonight, I want to thank someone very special," he said. "She wasn't part of the program, but she gave us something we'll never forget." Emma froze. Her name was called, and all heads turned toward her. People clapped again, louder than before. Some stood, others whistled. Emma didn't want to go back up to the stage. She didn't play for praise. She just wanted to survive. Her shift, finish her job, and go home. But now she was a symbol of something bigger. She wasn't just a girl who played a piano. She was the girl who reminded them what real feeling looked like. What beauty without fame sounded like. She slowly walked to the front of the room, her cheeks red, her eyes wide. The host handed her a small bouquet of flowers and said into the mic, "Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes the stars shine brightest when no one expects them to." The crowd clapped again, and Emma gave a small nod before quietly returning to the kitchen. Behind the doors, she leaned against the wall and held the flowers to her chest, her eyes filled with tears. But they were happy tears, she had thought. Her talent was buried forever, forgotten like an old song, but now it was alive again, stronger than ever. And though she didn't know what would happen next, one thing was clear. Ma was not just a waitress anymore. She was a spark in the dark, a song among silence, and the whole world had just heard her voice. Emma stood in the kitchen, holding the flowers close to her chest. Her fingers touched the soft petals gently, as if they were too delicate to hold. She had never received flowers before, not like this, not in front of so many people, 1,000. Thoughts filled her mind, but one feeling was stronger than all she felt: seen. For years, she had worked quietly, moving through life like a shadow. She served others, cleaned their mess, and kept her dreams hidden deep inside. No one had ever clapped for her. No one had ever said, "You're special," until now. Outside the kitchen doors, she could still hear the sounds of the event. Music, the laughter, the quiet talks, but everything felt different now. People weren't just talking about money or business or fashion. They were talking about her. Emma peeked through the door and saw small groups of people looking at the piano. Some were pointing, some were smiling. A few were even trying to play the keys, laughing softly when they missed the notes. Then she saw Mr. Linton again, the older man who had given her the card earlier. He was speaking to a younger man, reporter from one of the local magazines. The reporter looked excited and kept writing something in his notebook. Then both of them turned and looked toward the kitchen. Emma quickly stepped back, her heart racing. A few minutes later, a gentle knock came on the kitchen door. A young woman with a kind face stepped in and said, "Excuse me, Emma? The reporter would like to speak to you just for a moment." Emma hesitated. She had never talked to a reporter before. What would she say? She wasn't a star. She wasn't important. But something inside her whispered, "Be brave." She wiped her hands on her apron, fixed her hair, and walked out. Her steps were small, but steady. The reporter smiled and said, "That was beautiful tonight. Can I ask you a few questions?" Emma nodded slowly. He asked about her background, her love for music. and why she hadn't pursued it professionally. Emma answered honestly. She told him about her mother, her childhood, the piano lessons, and how life had changed after her. Mom passed away. The reporter listened carefully, writing everything down. "You have a powerful story," he said, "and talent like yours deserves to be heard." Emma didn't know how to respond. No one had ever said those words to her. Not with such belief. When the interview ended, Mr. Linton stepped forward again. "Emma," he said, "I know you're scared, but I think you have a gift that can help others, not just you. Your music tonight touched everyone, and that's something very rare." Emma looked at him, her eyes full of questions. "But what if I fail?" she asked softly. He smiled. "You already won. You faced a room full of strangers, a cruel man's challenge, and your own fear. You answered with music. That's not failure, that's courage." Emma felt something warm spread through her chest. For years, she had only seen herself as someone small. But now, people were seeing something else, something she had forgotten she even had. Later that night, as the guests started leaving, many of them came up to her personally to thank her. Some shook her hand, some shared memories of their own. Musical pasts. One woman said, "You reminded me of my daughter. She passed away last year. But tonight, I felt like she was here again." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She hadn't meant to touch hearts, she just played what she felt. But that was the power of music. It said what words could not as she walked out of the building. After her shift, the night air felt cool and calm. The streets were quiet, and the stars shone above her. For once, she didn't feel invisible. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "Mom." "I played again, just like you wanted." A soft breeze passed by, and Emma smiled. She didn't know what the future held, but something inside her had changed. She wasn't just the girl in the background anymore. She was a girl who had something to say, and people were finally listening. She walked home that night with the flowers in her arms and a spark in her soul. The journey ahead was still unknown. But one thing was clear: Ma had taken her first step back toward the dream she thought she had lost. And it had all started because one man tried to humiliate her, and she answered with a single, powerful note. The next morning, Emma woke up early, even though she had gone to sleep very late. She sat on the edge of her small bed, holding the flowers from last night. They had started to wilt a little, but they were still beautiful. Each petal reminded her of what had happened, how her hands had shaken on the piano, how the room had gone silent, and how the people had stood and clapped for her. She smiled to herself. It still didn't feel real. She picked up Mr. Linton's card and looked at it again. It felt heavy in her hand, not because of its weight, but because of what it meant. Emma had always lived a quiet life. She worked double shifts, paid bills, and stayed out of the spotlight. But last night, everything changed. Now people knew her name. People had listened to her. Not because she begged for their attention, but because her music spoke for her heart. As she got ready for work, her phone buzzed. It was a message from one of her coworkers. "You're in the news," it said, followed by a link. Emma opened it slowly. Her heart thumped louder with each second. There she was, her photo, taken while she was playing the piano. Her eyes were closed in the picture, her fingers pressing the keys gently. The article? Headline read, "Waitress stuns high-class party with surprise piano performance. Who is she?" Emma's breath caught in her throat. She scrolled down and saw the reporter's words. He had written about her life, her past, and her love for music. He didn't twist her story or make her sound like something she wasn't. He told it simply, beautifully. Hundreds of comments were below the article. Most were kind and supportive. "She made me cry, and I don't even know her," one person wrote. "Real talent always finds a way," said another. One comment stood out. "I want to hear more from her. She has something the world needs." Emma didn't know whether to cry or smile. She felt everything at once: hope, fear, joy, and confusion. At work, the mood had changed too when she walked into the restaurant. Her coworkers clapped and cheered. There she is, the piano queen. Someone shouted. Emma laughed and blushed, trying to hide her face, but it was no use. Everyone knew. Even the manager, who normally never smiled, gave her a proud nod later during her break. She sat quietly outside with a cup of tea. The sun warmed her face and she closed her eyes. That's when Mr. Linton called Emma. He said gently, "I saw the article and I meant what I said last night. I'd love to have you at the music school. We have evening lessons starting next week. You wouldn't be just a student, you could help teach the younger ones too." Emma was silent. She wasn't sure what to say, but "I work evenings." She replied softly, "I need the money." Mr. Linton was quiet for a moment, then said, "What if we found a way? You could work fewer shifts. I can help with part of your fees are offering to support you too." Emma's hands shook. Slightly, she had never asked for help in her life. But this wasn't just help, it was a chance. A door opening. "Can I think about it?" She asked. "Of course," he said kindly. "Take your time. But don't take too long, music waits for no one." That night, as she walked home, Emma took a longer path. Her feet led her past an old music store. In the window stood a dusty piano with chipped paint, but Emma didn't see the damage, she saw a memory. She remembered standing at a window like this as a child, dreaming, wishing, and now, somehow, life was calling her back. She pressed her hand to the cold glass and whispered, "Can I really do this?" Then she remembered the little girl at the party who had said, "I want to play like her." Emma smiled. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what her music could do, how it could heal, inspire, and connect. Back in her small room, she sat at her tiny kitchen table with Mr. Linton's card in one hand and the article open on her phone. She picked up a pencil and began writing down notes, chords, and pieces of melodies she hadn't touched in years. Her fingers moved fast, as if they had been waiting. The fear was still there, but something stronger had taken its place, hope. And for the first time in years, Emma allowed herself to dream. Not just silently in her heart, but loudly on paper, on keys, and maybe soon, on a stage again. She didn't know where the path would lead, but she was finally ready to follow it. One note had started everything, and now the music was calling. Her home. Emma sat alone in her room, the soft light from the window falling over her notebook. On the pages were music notes, half-written songs, and small lyrics she had scribbled. Her heart was full. She had spent years hiding her talent, hiding her dreams, but now it felt like the world was asking her to come out of the shadows. Mr. Linton's offer stayed in her mind all day. She thought about the music school, about helping younger students, and about finally playing again, not just for herself, but for others too. But one question still made her hesitate. What if this is all just one lucky moment? What if people forget about me next week? What if I fail? She closed the notebook and walked to the small mirror above her sink. Looking at her own reflection, she whispered, "Am I really good enough?" The next day, something unexpected happened as Emma reached the restaurant for her shift. A fancy black car was parked outside. She didn't think much of it, but when she walked in, her manager called her over with a serious look on his face. "There's someone here to see you. He said they asked for you by name." Emma was surprised. She walked carefully toward the corner booth and saw a woman in a dark green dress. She had a clipboard and a small camera bag beside her. The woman stood up and smiled. "Hi, Emma. I'm Clara. I'm a producer with a local TV station. We saw the article about you in the video online. It's getting millions of views now." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Millions?" she asked. Clara nodded. "Yes, your story touched people. They want to know more about you. We'd love to film a short piece. Just a small interview about your life, your music, how this all happened." Emma felt nervous. "I'm not a celebrity," she said shyly. "I'm just a waitress." Clara smiled gently. "Not anymore, Emma. You're someone with a voice, and right now, people are listening." Emma didn't know what to say. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had once cleaned tables, washed dishes, and wiped tears. Now those same hands had brought music to life and reached people across the world. The producer handed her a business card. "Think about it. It's your story to tell when you're ready." Later that evening, Emma sat outside during her break. Watching the sunset, the sky was painted in soft oranges and blues. She held the card in her hand and felt the weight of it. She remembered something her mother once told her: "Your music is like light. Even a small light can guide someone lost in the dark." Emma finally understood what that meant. That night, she made her decision. The next morning, she called Mr. Linton and said, "I'd like to come to your school. I want to learn again and maybe even teach." Mr. Linton's voice was full of joy. "I knew you would, Emma. The door is always open for you." The first class was small. It's just 5 students and 2 instructors. Emma sat quietly at the back, nervous but excited. When she touched the piano again, she didn't feel fear. She felt peace. Over the next few weeks, Emma's life changed more and more. She started attending evening classes regularly. Her coworkers covered for her when she needed time off. Everyone around her supported her dream. The TV interview finally happened too. Emma was shy at first, but the producer made her feel comfortable. She spoke about her past, her mother, the pain of leaving music behind. And the night she played again, when the interview aired, messages started pouring in. People from other cities, from other countries. Some shared their own stories of lost dreams and second chances. Others asked her to keep playing. Emma began uploading small videos online. It's just her and the piano. Simple songs, soft melodies, short clips from her lessons. Each video got more views, more love. But she never let it change her heart. She still worked part-time at the restaurant, still walked to class, still bought flowers for her mother's grave every Sunday. One day, a letter arrived at the school. It was from a young girl who said, "I saw your video. And now I want to be a pianist too. I'm learning. And I hope to play like you one day." Emma cried when she read that, not from sadness, but from something deeper, a feeling of connection. She had become what her mother always believed she could be, on inspiration, not because of fame or money or followers, but because she was honest, because she played with feeling, because she never gave up. Even when life tried to silence her, she looked back on that night, the night when Jared tried to embarrass her, and she smiled. He had tried to make her feel small, but instead, he helped awaken the fire inside her, and now she wasn't afraid of the piano anymore. She was home, in every note, every chord, every song, and the world was finally listening. The days passed, and Emma's life slowly became something new. She was still the same girl who had once walked quietly through crowds, serving drinks and clearing plates. But now, when people looked at her, they saw more than a waitress. They saw someone who had faced fear, and instead of running away, she had answered with music. Emma now spent her evenings at Mr. Linton's music school, helping children learn simple songs and scales. She still remembered how it felt to be a shy student, afraid to press the wrong key, so she guided each child with kindness. With soft words and patient hands, the children loved her, and their parents did too. She also continued playing for herself, writing new melodies late at night in her small room. Her heart was healing through every note she played. The pain of losing her mother, the years she had locked away her dream, all of it was now slowly turning into something beautiful. Her videos online kept growing in popularity. People shared them with words like calming, honest, and full of soul. But Emma didn't let the numbers get to her head. She didn't care about being famous. She only wanted to keep playing, keep touching hearts. One day, the restaurant where she worked held a staff party. It was simple, with balloons and music and snacks on the table. Her coworkers laughed and danced. And someone brought out a small keyboard as a surprise for her. "Come on, Emma," they said. "Play something for us." Emma laughed. "Again?" She joked, but her heart was warm. She sat down and played a cheerful little song that made everyone smile. It wasn't serious or fancy, was full of joy. Later, the manager pulled her aside and said, "You've brought light to this place. Emma, people feel better when you're here. You're not just a worker anymore. You're part of our story." Emma thanked him with a grateful smile. She didn't expect praise. But hearing those words meant the world to her. Outside the restaurant, she saw someone waiting near the sidewalk. It was Jared's, the same man who had once tried to humiliate her at the party. He looked nervous, holding his phone in one hand. "Hey," he said quietly, "do you remember me?" Emma nodded. "Yes, I remember." He looked down, ashamed. "I just wanted to say sorry. What I did that night was wrong. I didn't know who you were." Emma stopped him gently. "You didn't need to know who I was," she said calmly. "You just needed to show respect." Jared nodded slowly. "You're right," he said. "But I've been following your journey, and I'm happy for you." Emma didn't smile or frown. She just looked at him with peace. "Thank you," she replied. "But this journey isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about being true to myself." He gave a small nod, then turned and walked away, leaving her standing under the streetlight. That night, Emma sat by her window, looking at the stars. She thought about everything: her past, her mother, the night at the piano, the pain, the joy, the people she had met. She whispered, "I made it. Mom, I didn't give up," in the quiet of her room. She pulled out her notebook and wrote a new song. This one didn't sound sad or scared. It sounded hopeful, strong, and full of light. At the music school, Mr. Linton gave her more chances to teach and perform. One day, he told her, "You've become more than a student now. Emma, you're a leader, and people look up to you." Soon, she was invited to perform at a charity concert. It was a small event, but the room was full of people who believed in her. Some came with children, some with stories of their own. Emma walked onto the stage, not nervous like before. She smiled at the audience, sat at the grand piano, and took a deep breath. Then she played. The music flowed from her fingers like a river, smooth and full of emotion. Every note told a story, not of pain, but of rising again, not of fear, but of hope. The room was silent except for the sound of her melody. People closed their eyes. Some wiped away tears. And when the final note faded, the crowd stood and clapped. Not wildly, but with deep respect. Emma stood, gave a small bow, and smiled. She was no longer just the girl who had once worked behind the scenes. She was the girl who had stepped into the light. Not to seek fame, but to share her heart, and the world, one listener at a time, had listened. Not because she shouted, but because her quiet song had spoken louder than words ever could. She walked off the stage that night with peace in her heart, knowing that this was just the beginning. And all of it, every change, every step, every moment, had started with one note, one moment of courage, one girl who said yes to the piano. When the world was watching, and her soul was finally ready to sing,